Activate your primal blueprint for wellness, a conversation with Dr. Jenny Powers. Ready to reclaim your vitality? Join us as we welcome Dr. Jenny Powers, author of On the Origin of Being, to explore the link between evolutionary biology and modern well-being. Dr. Powers reveals how to activate your primal blueprint for optimal health by focusing first on sleep, nutrition, work, rest, and our connection to nature. Discover how to thrive in the modern world by tapping into your ancient biological wisdom. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. Welcome, and let me share a little bit about the extraordinary guest that we have here on the show today. Jenny Powers, PhD, is a former athlete and scientist turned writer. Her journey through life from college basketball player to immunologist, wife, and mother has culminated in her passion for writing. Powers holds a PhD in immunology and is the author of On the Origin of Being. She lives in Colorado with her family, and I am so pleased to help welcome to our stage today, Ms. Jenny Powers. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here today, Jenny, because this conversation is going to be so fun. It's right up my alley. All of the research that you've done, all of the science that you've done, and then you've put it into writing for the rest of us in the world to access that, to understand that in a better way. So let's get started by sharing with the audience a little bit about yourself so they can get to know you more.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I grew up as an Air Force brat. I moved all around the country. My dad was a fighter pilot. And I was always, I was always good at sports and academics. But as I got into high school, I really started feeling the pressure, whether it was external or coming from me or whatever. But I started feeling like I have to succeed. I have to succeed. I have to succeed. And so going through college, playing intercollegiate basketball was a lot of pressure. We were good back in the 90s. And then I got a chemical engineering degree. And somewhere along that line, somewhere during that time in my late teens, early 20s, I really started to associate my self-worth with my achievement. And that is not a good thing to do, as I've learned. When I got into grad school, I kept thinking like, I have to achieve, I have to do more, I have to, reach this level of success. And I didn't even know if that's what I wanted. I just knew that I've had this just drive to do it, even though it wasn't necessarily a healthy thing for me to do. So I got my PhD and I loved learning about the human body. The more I learned about it, I think the more in awe of it I was. So even though I was struggling, with this identity crisis and having to succeed all the time, I really feel like I had a rich academic upbringing, I guess you can say. But again, like I said, it began to wear on me. I started being really stressed out. I started being really burned out. And I was really, really depressed. And I made the decision to step away from academia. It was a really hard decision. At the time, I felt like I can't cut it. I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing and I need to find something else that I wanted to do. And it took me a long time. So when I stopped academia, I had my kids and I started kind of on this journey of healing. I started spirituality, and I started trying to help myself kind of enter into self-love in a way that I never had before. And that whole healing process, it made me realize that my entire life I wanted to be a writer. And for some reason, it just didn't seem like it was the the best, the most elite thing I could do. You know what I mean?
Of course,
And
yes.
so I started writing, and surprisingly, I was writing middle grade fiction, which is for 8 to 12-year-olds. So I have several middle grade manuscripts, and I write
Makes
adult
a lot
short.
of sense psychologically. When
Yeah.
because you had wanted to be that for so long, it's a part of self-healing,
That's
like you're
true.
writing about something that you desired or dreamed of, or what maybe a different sort of reality that you wanted. Anyway, that's just my
No,
take
no,
on it,
that's
is that
that's the
it's a
first time I've ever thought of that, and I think that's
yeah.
really good. It's almost like that's where I froze, um, with what I wanted to do. Um, but so writing doesn't necessarily pay the bills. And so I was enjoying, kind of being a mom and writing and having my own, just deciding my own boundaries, deciding what I wanted to do. But I needed to find a job. And writing doesn't really work, pay that much. So I looked, and on a monster.com of all places, I found this ad by somebody who wanted to hire someone to help research and write a book. And this person was Luke Comer, who is my co-author. And when we met, we probably talked for 2 hours. I remember during my interview, I was late for picking up my son from preschool because we just kept talking and talking. And what he had brought up to me was, he had kind of had his own, in his 20s, feeling like the world just wasn't providing him what he needed. And so he started investigating. He started with nutrition. And so he kind of has gone on this deep dive of nutrition and our evolutionary biology of nutrition, and how all of our nutrition needs developed. But as he was doing that, he also saw all these other places that he realized that the modern world was not meeting our evolutionary needs. And so he had this concept that he's writing books on the nutrition part, but he had this concept that there's all of these parts. We have 10 different ways of being that we are not living in according with our biology anymore. And the more he talked, the more excited I got, because, and this didn't dawn on me right then, but kind of over the course of writing this book, I realized, me not being able to cut it, me feeling like a failure, it wasn't me at all. It's that my biology was not set up to be in this rat race that I was in. Um,
Mm.
it wasn't my fault. There were biological reasons why I struggled, and why when I made different choices in my life, I thrived. So I took that job, and over the course of 3 years, I wrote the book, and then COVID happened. And so everything kind of put on hold, but we published the first four things that you had mentioned earlier in the first book, and it came out over the summer, and it's just been a wild ride since then.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I could unpack so many things in this, Jenny, and I love how you're so vulnerable in explaining your experience that we all have, right, as human beings, where we struggle with the lack of self-love, thinking that we need to do this, thinking that we can't do one thing in life because it's not going to amount to anything, or it's not
Mhm.
good enough, or it's not going to pay the bills. I mean, the list goes on and on and on,
Mhm.
right?
It's not
That's why we
practical
have
enough.
no, it's not practical, but
Yeah.
that's why you were able to research and write a book, because you realized and understood that it's not your fault and it's nobody's fault. In fact, the global pandemic with weight and with disease is because it's not our fault, and everything is designed to put us into high stress,
Mhm.
to kill us. And so we don't know until we know how to really navigate around that to the best of our abilities. It is kind of this bombardment of things that it's difficult to take away, right?
Mhm.
So you first started with this in this particular, and I'm going to hold up the book because it's a cool book, guys. Look at that, on the origin of being. And I really, really love the art that you guys did. And it's um, so you talked a lot about nutrition, about sleep,
Mhm.
all of the really basic things that we need as human beings to really start getting out of that fight for flight
Mhm.
aspect where our body can truly restore itself. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that.
Okay.
What were some of the biggest aha findings that you had that kind of were like, oh my gosh?
Yeah, well, I like to think of it as, there's the mismatch hypothesis was kind of a big aha for me. And that is, we evolved in response to our environment, and we lived in equilibrium with our environment, and we had homeostasis within our bodies. And so we were going along and we were happy, we were hunter gatherers, and then the agricultural revolution started. And then so here are our bodies, and here is our environment, and this is the rate of change, right? Where our environment's changing, and then hit the industrial revolution, and it gets even steeper. And then now we're hitting the information age, and it gets even steeper. And we're still down here with our hunter-gatherer bodies, with our hunter-gatherer genes. And we're like, our bodies are like, what the heck is going on? Like, things have changed so fast. We have not had a chance to evolve. And yes, humans are really, really cool because we're so smart and creative, and we can use our brains to make adaptations. We don't have to wait for genetics to change and for adaptations to come genetically. We can adapt with our behavior. However, a lot of the things, especially nowadays, the environment kind of it forces our behaviors into certain things that aren't necessarily healthy for us. So the aha moment, when like I said, it's not my fault, but I need to learn about it so I can do something about it.
Right. Take control of
Take
that.
control.
Mhm.
And just knowing, it just meant so much to me to finally like be able to let go that this wasn't my fault. Because when you're being judgmental on yourself, you can't change anything. So once you could kind of let that go, it became easier and easier to make some changes in my life.
Oh my gosh. No, surrender has always been one of the most difficult and challenging things
Yes.
for me personally. And I think it is for many, many people
Yes.
as well.
And
Jenny,
also, so sorry, another thing that that really touched me as well is, I'd always, like I said, I enjoyed studying the human body and was fascinated by how it worked and how it didn't go wrong all the time. It's so complex. But what I didn't appreciate was that we have this continuum all the way back to the beginning of life, and we're connected to that, to that very beginning of life. We're not separated, from our past. And evolution isn't something just to learn in school and then forget about. It actually has some bearing on our lives today. And so learning about that and now trying to share this with other people has become a real passion of mine, because it has the potential to change people's lives.
okay, so let's uncover that a little bit because I agree with you. That's always been one of my wow, oh my goodness. When we start to understand on a biological level, all of that information that it's stored within
Mhm.
us, that where we react and respond in so many different ways because of that, because of those historical markers that our ancestors did and
Mhm.
how they lived. So do you let's dig in with that a little
Okay.
bit. Jenny, can you share a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah. So, for example, with sleep, this is probably the one that's easiest to trace all the way back to the beginning of life. So when life was just forming in the oceans, they developed circadian rhythms. And this was important because, a cell doesn't want to necessarily go through cell division with the irradiation of the sun. And they can't do photosynthesis if they're not at the surface. So they had to kind of genetically select for genes that would help them, come to the surface in the morning and then go into the depths at night, and that's when they would do the cell cycle. So the biological processes of those first cells in life were attuned to the day and night cycle of the earth. And so every living thing since then relies on these circadian rhythms to start timing their biological processes. And what's important is that circadian rhythms kind of have to be reset every day. And when our hunter-gatherer ancestors would wake up in the morning, they would have bright sunlight. For their morning, they'd be out in the bright sunlight, they'd be in touch with nature, and they would get light, and that would tell their bodies, okay, it's time to start your day, and not just, okay, I got to go find food or I got to make a shelter. Internally, these hormones stop, these hormones start, these, digestion ramps up, all of these things that your body has timed to do over the course of the day. And then at nighttime, when the sun goes down, they didn't have any light. They had firelight or moonlight. But interestingly, those don't really have the wavelength of blue light. And the reason why you hear so much about blue light, and that's because our circadian rhythms are exquisitely sensitive to blue light, because that's the wavelength of light that penetrated the deepest into the oceans. And that's where life started. So I always thought that was just really cool.
I really love that part because that's, again, fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now fast forward to the modern day, we spend our lives indoors. We're never exposed to the full brightness of the sun unless we actually deliberately go do it. And then at night, we kind of wake up and we live this twilight existence all day. And the sun goes down, but we still have the same level of light exposure. Right. So our bodies don't know if we're coming or going. We just, so we would have a bright light and then it would fade off and then be nothing. And now we just have this light.
You're explaining neurotic behaviors, Jenny. I get it now. I get it. We're so confused.
Yeah. So our bodies are confused, and we can't sleep very well, and we can't, we're tired during the day, and our hormones are out of balance, and so that's just one aspect. And I really, like I said, I feel like the circadian rhythms and sleep is the one thing you can directly, there's a line directly back to the first cells that existed in the world. And I think that's really cool.
It is really cool. And it because of that, it just solidifies all of that, the importance of that, and to get back to that as much as possible. Turning off the lights, maybe light a candle instead around your house. I have done that now after interviewing so many cool people like you, like candles, which is beautiful, right? And it just sets the tone for the body to start relaxing, and it feels good. I feel like I'm in like a spa every single night because I get to do that. I choose to do that because I know that is how my body's going to start slowing down and knowing that it's time to go into deep rest. So we're going to move into our commercial. Okay, stay tuned.
Are you ready to take control of your ride to wellness? Rev up with Driven Living. Visit www.drivenliving.com and buckle up for a journey. Get exclusive access to our Wellness Driven Life Show guest portal, where you can dive deep into the minds of our esteemed guests. Sign up for our newsletter and get insider scoops on these distinguished personalities. It's like having a backstage pass to their life-changing wisdom. But that's not all. You'll also receive a free hug. You heard me right, a free hug. An enlightening ebook from the Driven Living team. Discover the science-backed benefits of hugging yourself. It's a fill-up for your wellness tank. Because at Driven Living, we believe in fueling your journey to wellness, both physically and psychologically. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.drivenliving.com today.
Welcome back, everyone. Here with the incredible author of On the Origin of Being with Dr. Jenny Powers. I'm so excited to have you here again, Jenny, with this conversation. It is beautiful when we get to tie in historically why we do the things that we do and what really makes a difference for us to live a wellness-driven life. So we've shed some light on our circadian rhythms, right? And how that really helps us with sleep, which is another one of those powerful buckets that we've got to get that sleep, that rest, that restore, because otherwise the body just does not function, the brain just does not function the way that it needs to. And moving into nutrition a
Mhm.
little bit, let's talk about that. What were some of the aha moments you came up with nutrition when it has to do with our origin?
Yeah, well, if you look at human evolution, especially like the human line of evolution, and you look at the changes from like the common ancestor we had with chimpanzees and bonobos 7, 8 million years ago, it was really cool to see the genetic changes that allowed us to be upright and walk upright. But the biggest amazing aha change was the size of our brains. Our brains really started taking off. But in order for our brains to grow, other organs in our bodies that were energetically expensive, like our guts and our digestive tract, had to shrink in order to shunt more energy to our brains. And so, but at the same time, our brains are really, really hungry, especially for glucose. So we really, as our brains got bigger, we were able to use our intelligence to find foods that would actually give our bodies what they need. However, since our guts were shrinking and we can't eat leaves all day the way other primates do, um, we had sorry, my dog just came in. I got distracted. We had to start looking for different foods. So our diet changed because our brains got bigger, and because our brains got bigger, we were able to find different foods to eat. And
And
so,
we fuel it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Those
the
different
foods we
foods.
needed, yeah, the foods we needed to be easily digested. We ate a lot more animal protein, animal fat, that kind of thing. But we also started eating, we had eaten fruits and stuff before, but we started eating more nuts and tubers and things that have more nutrient dense. And in order to have those things available to us, we had to process them. And this is not processing the way we think of it nowadays. Processing food would be
Yeah,
cooking it.
please don't buy anything at the store that says processed.
Yeah,
That's not what we mean.
right. I mean, we would cook it, or we'd grind it up, or we'd soak
Yeah.
it, or ferment it. And these are the things that we used to do in order to make it possible to chew and eat, not have to eat all day the way some of our primate ancestors do. Get a dense amount of nutrition in a small amount of time that was easy to chew, easy to digest, and gave our body what it needed. So, but
Mm.
nowhere in the history of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, when we processed this food, we did not strip anything away. We still ate it whole. So when people are like, eat whole foods, um, that's the reason. Because right
Yeah.
now, what we're doing, these ultra processed foods, we're stripping away the fiber and the like the micronutrients, and we're getting sugar. And then we're stripping out, we're refining oil, and we're getting oil. And then we have like we even have protein powder, and then we like shove those three things together and make all these different products. And that's what we're eating. And so not only are we not getting the fiber and the micronutrients that we need, but we also our bodies are being exposed to these macronutrients, the carbs, the fats, the proteins, in a manner that it's not used to receiving them. This is why type 2 diabetes is such a high prevalent thing, because those processed, refined sugars go straight into our bloodstream. And rather than if there was fiber and other things associated with what you were eating, it would digest slower, and it would slowly go into your bloodstream over
Mm.
time. Um, and so
Mhm.
I feel like we've overshot. Like, we needed to find foods that were easy to digest, easy to chew, gave us, what our bodies needed to work. Um, but we totally overshot with the ultra processing, because we have now gotten to the point where these foods, if we drink a soda, we don't even have to chew. We get all of these things in what we drink.
Mhm.
Our bodies just have never encountered that before. So not only are we not getting the things that our bodies are used to getting, but we're receiving the nutrients in a way that our bodies never evolved to receive.
So let's highlight that a little bit too. When you talk about our bodies never evolved to be able to receive these things, what is that like? Because there's contradictory aspects on that, right? Where people are like, "Well, that's okay. We're gonna evolve. We're gonna be able to hang out all night long and do the things, and I'm gonna be able to eat this because the body will just naturally adapt to that." What is your take on that through this research?
So, like I said, our bodies adapt to a point and our behaviors can adapt to help us. But over the last 12,000 years since the beginning of the agricultural revolution and that the start of that steep curve of environmental change, that is really not enough time for major evolutionary adaptations, genetic adaptations to occur. In fact, the author of *Sapiens*, Yuval Noah Harari, he would argue, it's such a great book, but in his book, he argued that we, our intelligence and our innovation and our technology, we have bypassed evolution to survive. We don't necessarily need to evolve to survive. We just need to change our behaviors to survive. And I like to say this because it really is a behavior thing, right? We changed our behaviors, and modernity kind of forced us to change our behaviors into unhealthy ones. But it's like I said, it's in our hands. We can make the decisions, and it's our behaviors to change to make better decisions.
Yeah,
So
it's our responsibility.
our behaviors that were compelled by modern society, we changed our behaviors and we started having diseases of modernity and all kinds of issues and problems. We can make that same, like another decision to start bringing some of these things once we're educated about what's going on and we know the things that help us, then we can make those decisions to change our behaviors into something more healthy.
Ah, that's so beautifully said. It's the behaviors and the responsibility to change those, the decision making. We have the choice in so many things, but our bodies certainly have not bypassed any of that. It's just too fast. We've
Mhm.
done things and switched things up way too fast for us to get to that point. So
Exactly.
that is beautifully said, and thank you so much for sharing that, Jenny. What kind of findings did you have when it comes to nature? Because those are some of my
Mhm.
favorite topics as well. And I think that so many of these topics really blend together and you can
Mhm.
access so many of them at the same time. Like our connection with nature has an effect on our sleep. What we put
Mhm.
in and on and around our body has a connection to this and that. The movement of our body, if we just go outside and move our body, then you're
Mhm.
hitting two at once, right? So share a little bit more about what you found with our connection to nature and why it's important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we evolved, as you can imagine, we were never not in touch with nature. We evolved hand in hand with nature, and the changes of our environment are what had us evolve. The selection pressure for our bodies to evolve in different ways. And with our hunter-gatherer ancestors, it's almost as if they needed to be very in touch with nature. They needed to be very in touch in the present moment because it was a survival thing. They needed to know what was going around in their environment. They needed to know what plants they could eat. They needed to know where the animals migrated. They needed to know when the weather was going to change. They were very, very in touch with just the cycles of the world. Um, and it was important for survival. So those who are really in tune with nature had better survival. And so this is a hypothesis by E.O. Wilson. It's called the biophilia hypothesis. And he hypothesizes that this connection with nature is actually a genetically, selected for trait because it was so important for our survival.
Mm.
And so nowadays we could live our entire lives without going outside. And I like to say that we're the only species on the planet that doesn't live in our natural habitat. And if you look at zoos and animals in captivity, when you take wild animals and put them in captivity, you take them out of their habitat, they start acting weird and they might not necessarily survive. And so I think we've taken ourselves out of our natural habitat. And it's actually even worse than that. I feel like a lot of people have not only just removed their bodies from nature, but they've actually severed their connection with their selves, more than just our bodies, but our minds and our souls and stuff. They've severed that because they don't think we need it anymore. But there are studies after studies, and there are so many popular things now that going back into nature has so many benefits for your body. Relaxation and cortisol levels, it decreases your stress levels, increases your immunity. There's all these really amazing studies. And so I'm happy that that's happening again. But so that is like now we're getting our bodies back in there. And now I think even more than ever, because we've had this separation, we have this, a lot of people, I'm not saying generalizations, but a lot of people think that we are above nature. Nature is ours to control, nature is ours to use. And so they think that we're here and nature's here, when really we're all woven together. We are part of nature, we're part of the ecosystem. And when we are damaging our world around us, we're really damaging our ability to survive and thrive, because the earth actually still provides all of our needs: clean air, clean water, food, and all the resources that we get to make all of our things. And so I don't think people realize how important being more stewards of the land instead of, the dominance over the land, having more stewardship, I think is really important. So if people realize how good nature is for their stress and their actual physical health, but then for the health of our society, I guess we need to start thinking, going back and helping nature itself.
I love that you bring this up, because I think it's vital. And so one of my favorite things and topics is the science behind all of this. I like to talk about the spiritual aspect a lot here on the show. And I love how you combined that with nature, that we are connected to all of that. And now we have proof. And so it's just kind of explaining that. And I feel very strongly that your book on the origin of being really helps bring that to light for an audience that wouldn't just pick up a spiritual book or what have you, or just hasn't put the connection together yet, doesn't have the belief in it yet, or the understanding and the knowledge and know-how. So thank you so much for being that in the world and an advocate for that.
Thank you.
And talking about animals in captivity and how they go a little crazy. I tell you what, Jenny, I go a little crazy if I don't have some outdoor time. And I noticed that about myself. I mean, it's a real thing. If I don't get outside time in some way, I'm a little more depressed, if I would even use that word, or my energy is just lower. And I know that about myself. So those are some of the things that I really try and strive to implement in my life. And speaking of implementations, you have all this incredible knowledge that you've experienced and understood through this research. Can you share with us some of the things that you implement on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, I try to get up every morning and go outside. So I'm doing the nature and the bright sunlight thing. It helps to have dogs to take for walks, but you don't need to have a dog to go for a walk. So I get the bright sunlight in the morning. And I live in Colorado. It's just a beautiful place to live. And so I am constantly, either if I'm on a walk or in the car, I'm constantly trying to connect with nature. I'm looking at the clouds. I'm looking at the quality of the light. I'm looking at like the birds who are flying around the intersection. I mean, all that stuff is connecting with nature. And so to go back to sleep and circadian rhythms, I've really tried to have all of my devices turned to nightshade or, red shift or the night shift to decrease all the blue light. I try to turn off lots of lights. I tried to reduce my screen time at night. And what I've started doing is I am trying to get in bed by 9:30 or 10 every night. I used to have this thing called, what's it called? Revenge procrastination. What is it called? Anyway, it's where
I don't know, but I'd love to know.
You procrastinate going to bed because you feel like you finally have time for yourself. And so
Oh, yeah.
you stay up way too late as a revenge kind of thing because the rest of your day was so taken up. And I used to do that, especially with young kids, because when you have young kids, it feels like it's until they go to sleep, it's not your time. But I found that going to bed early and not getting like being really kind of disciplined and not getting stuck watching just one more episode, or I have to work, I have to work, I have to work. I really try to go to bed and like around 9:30 or 10 the same time every night. So that's sleep. With nutrition, one of the biggest things that I've done is I've really reduced how much ultra processed food I eat. I am really trying to eat more and more whole foods. Um, and I've noticed a huge difference without trying. I've lost weight. My joints feel better. Um,
Mm.
I I don't have like acid ingestion all the time. I mean, it's so cool for some of these things to start working because then it makes you want to hold on to them even tighter and it lets you try more things because you feel better. So
Oh,
that's one of the big things.
that's that, Jenny. I would love to know, what are some of your favorite go-to whole foods?
Oh my gosh, I am in love with seeds and nuts. I make this granola that has, oats and it has sunflower seeds and chia seeds and um, man, nuts like hazelnuts and
Seeds.
pistachios and um, what else? Almond. I mean, so it's just this mix of seeds and nuts with a little honey, with the olive oil baked and stuck together, and that is just my go-to snack all the
Okay,
time.
everyone, you know what to send your favorite author for Christmas and birthdays. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
granola. I love this granola. So, yeah, but I also, I have started just buying vegetables that I've never really tried this vegetable before, and I'm like chopping it up, and I'm like, oh, let's try it, and then actually, it's funny because when I first started making these meals that didn't have any processed foods in them, they were like very veggie and plant based. But it's not that I'd get cut out meat completely, but I would eat it and my body would feel so good. It's almost as if, I don't know, there was this, well, there is a gut brain connection, but my gut was telling my brain, oh, this is the stuff, rather than eating and still having cravings. I would eat and I'd feel so satiated and so happy and I wouldn't crave more food. It was easy
It's
to
like
not
a
crave
it's
food.
like a food high.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
forgive
a
me, audience, for
good
saying
food.
that, but
Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain that because it's true. You just feel good. You feel happier. It's like endorphins have been released because you're eating the right things and your
Mhm.
body's like, "Yes, give
Well,
me
and
more of that."
exactly, we're eating the right things, the things that we evolved to eat, rather than having the foods that we eat now, the modern foods that are available to us hijack all of these natural things that we're supposed to feel with food. But like sugar and processed, processed grains and stuff, that hijacks that dopamine reward system in our brain. Um, because food, as we evolved, we needed to eat. We needed sweet things. Sweet things were very rare when we were hunter gatherers. And so now
Fruit.
that there's so much abundance of it, our bodies are like, yeah, we want this because that's what we evolved to crave that sugar because that's what our brains need the most is that glucose. Um, so I know we're going back to kind of how we evolved, but I think if people could realize that the fact that they can't stop eating the ice cream or cookies or the junk food, it's not because they have poor willpower. It's because their brains are being hijacked by this food that we never used to have. So hopefully knowing some of these things will help people make those decisions to eat something like, okay, I'm not going to eat a cookie after lunch. I'm going to have a handful of my granola, and that's better.
I love that you bring that up, and thank you so much for sharing some of your favorite things, and I think that that is what's so cool about you is that you do bring up, oranges and all of those things because you've spent, what is it now, going on 4 or 5 years doing the research, doing the work, trying to better understand these things. And speaking of the work for this book, this is a part of a 3-part series. Is that correct? Are
Yes.
you open, willing, able to share with our audience what the next ones look like?
Sure. Yeah. So as you talked about, kind of this first book covers our basic needs, right? Kind of our body, mind, basic needs. The next book, we kind of go up a level and we start talking about our social needs. So that we're going to talk about social groups, we're going to talk about child rearing, and we're going to talk about the sexes. And so then the third book, we go up a notch again, and we talk about our cultural needs. And so we're going to talk about rituals, we're going to talk about the arts, and we're going to talk about religion and spirituality, and how all of those things kind of evolved over time, and how we have gotten so far away from, just looking at the loneliness pandemic right now. People are hearing more and more about it, especially after COVID. We are social creatures. We are not meant to be alone. And so understanding why we have to be social, we might not have to be social now for survival, but why our bodies and minds still need that social connection. So hopefully, the same kinds of things will come up in these books. People will kind of understand the why and the how and the history, and be able to make decisions to change their behaviors.
That's absolutely wonderful. And it made me think of the blue zone. So
Totally.
hopefully many people watching this, if you watch the show, about the blue zones. You've done a little bit of research on that. And I feel like this is just a deeper understanding, deeper dive, like the History Channel of the blue zones, like kind of understanding of what really helps us thrive and live longer. And these are some of the reasons. And so you're bringing in that community factor, the cultural aspects, the spiritual aspects, all of those things that really have a role and a play in our overall well-being. Jenny, it's been amazing having you on the Wellness Driven Life Show. I want to make sure everyone knows where to find you. So I've had it displayed here, trickled in throughout the show, your website, and I'm going to say it for those of you listening in, on the originofbeing.com. Check it out and order a book, get your copy, because the next 2 are coming and you're going to want to be prepared for those as well. This is great knowledge. It's also in the description below. Jenny, again, you've been an incredible guest. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience today?
Well, first, I wanted to thank you. I got in contact with you and I've followed you, and it's just such an honor to be on your show. I think the thing that I like to say is, and because it happened to me, when I was writing this book, I got so overwhelmed with all of the things that I wasn't doing right. And kind of as I was kind of developing this, it's not my fault kind of mentality, I was also developing this, don't get down on yourself for not doing all of these things, because it's really a practice, just like meditation. There's all of these things in our life that we think of as practices, and we don't necessarily think of our lifestyle as a practice. And so when you practice something, you take small little steps. And when those small little steps start making you feel better, you take more steps and more steps. So don't let all of this information overwhelm you. Pick the things that speak to you the most and might be the easiest things for you to change. And then it'll start to snowball.
Wise words, Jenny. That's incredible. Thank you so much again for being our guest on the show. Take what you love, implement in small steps. Thank you so much for our audience, because without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much. Goodbye for now, and we will see you next time.